from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm very pleased to have with me Kevin Marcus. He is staying late at night in the West Coast in the United States today when we are doing this recording. Kevin, thank you very much for being on the show today. Can you just let us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Kevin Marcus. Let me just tell you first off, thank you for having me on the show. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I'm myself, CTO of a company called Versium Analytics. We've been doing essentially analytics for market purposes for about 12 years now. It's really starts from sort of a data-centric view of how marketing should happen for people, and we sort of take it through essentially the life cycle of what somebody may be interested in doing. We originally started with modeling for audiences, whereby somebody would come to us and say, "I'm looking for someone to purchase widget X," and essentially what we did create models to determine how likely is it that somebody's going to purchase the widget. Since then, it's just to quite a few different tools and things, including things like fixing data errors or cleaning up data in the first place, which, especially in the AI world, is extremely important. Down to even simple things like, hey, when is the business email associated with this consumer email or things of that nature? One thing, just because you mentioned it, we do not play directly in the cookie space. We don't drop cookies. We don't do anything with cookies, but obviously some of our clients do. So there is some association.
Okay, that's good to know. So it's good that you mentioned this, because a lot of noise came out, about the end of third-party cookies on companies. So if you can explain a little bit on that part and the need to augment their first-party data, and what do you think the challenges that they will face during this process?
Well, there's quite a few. So the first thing is, third-party cookies in the first place. It's not necessarily a terrible thing that they're going away in my mind. It probably is going to be a huge impact. There's a lot of people who are panicked about it, but what it really does is it really pushes the onus onto the individual brands to actually start building and developing a relationship with their user base. And it's a really, really good. But there are actually several schemes already that have essentially come out to, again, it's not really a third-party cookie, but to help with the data sharing on the back end in order to provide these types of insights to these first-party data people. Which websites did they visit, all these kinds of things, but based on somebody they already have a relationship with. So they can still get a lot of the same type of data.
And actually, I think, Kevin, you would agree with me. It was always the customer choice to accept these cookies or not to accept them, right?
Yes. And it's funny. I mean, if you just ask a general person, what do you think about them? Everybody's got a very negative. But at the end of the day, if you actually look at the contents inside of a lot of these cookies, they're just, numbers and things that refer to in a database somewhere. So that information really is difficult to see. And I think that's what's kind of giving them a bad name. But again, at the end of the day, this all comes down to, did the user say, yes, I'll accept the third-party cookie or not in the first place?
Yeah, and we know it. I know from myself, sometimes we see these long, agreements, terms and conditions. And usually no one reads them, but yeah, it was always the choice of us, the consumers, to accept them. Now, you do some work, regarding or around AI, and we know that AI doesn't work by itself; it needs data. So, how does the quality of data impact the effectiveness of AI? Can you collaborate the concept of bad data in, bad AI out, and share some examples of how this can affect the business?
Sure. So it's a really big deal. And actually, even before we get to bad data, there's a part in front of that, which is just how many samples do I have to work with? Do I have lots of data, or do I only have a little bit? And that makes it really big. How good your models, how strong are the signals, these kinds of things. Right now, when a lot of people think about AI, they immediately think Chat GPT, or they think about generative images and things like this. which is great. But there's a whole space around AI that has nothing to do with these things. So it was just making prediction. Is the person going to buy the thing? Will this person pay me back if I make them a loan? FICO score, for example, or other types of things like that. So when you really start to consider all of the different aspects of AI, it's a very broad field, and a lot of people have a very small view in it. So the impact really of bad data going in is that you're training a system. You're essentially trying to show it, here are the statistics associated with people that purchase and don't purchase, or people that commit fraud or don't commit fraud, who's going to pay me back, who isn't going to pay me back. If the data goes in to train that system is bad in some way, the predictive goodness, what comes out of that model is going to be significantly reduced. Make sense? So
Yep.
when you really start looking at it, you need to have a good broad set of data to begin with, good signal data inside there. And if you had something, for example, that's people that live in, I'm just looking this up, of course, state X, they are 20% likely not to pay me back. But people in state Y, only 1% likely not to pay me back. If you think about it like that, in a broad sense, that could actually be, but probably it's not really going to be that high in first state, right? It's probably better than 20%. The sampling of data that you have may represent that, but maybe that's even because there's some biases built into your data. It could be as simple as, wow, I only used one city in that state. Or perhaps I used, a high crime area or something like this in order to train my data. So it's not representative of the entire state. On top of that, you may have something like the value associated with products or with the loans that you're providing to somebody. It may turn out that those were only very large loans or very small loans. So it's not a good representative example of what you will see in the marketplace.
Yeah. Now, actually, you brought two important things, and one is a fun fact, I would say. Yesterday, I was chatting with someone who's in the cybersecurity where they adopted some AI, and funny thing is that customers start to ask, where is the Chat GPT like interface? Because now people they think that anything when you mention AI is just a UI similar to Chat GPT, which is of course not the case. Now, the thing is, how okay, so we know that the bad data or biased data, let's say, can affect. So how we can get better data? Like, what makes a data set? Let me ask it a little bit in a geeky way or technical term. What makes a data set really good or clean? How
Sure.
does?
So there's a lot of different ways you would look at it, depending on what data is. But in the simplest sense, you want to have data is broad, sampled randomly, or is representative of whatever it is that you're looking at. And essentially tries to remove the types of biases we were just talking about. Perhaps it's a small city or a big crime area, things like this. You want to make sure you have not just those, but also lots of others. So that when I go and I randomly sample, essentially end up with something that's a fair and accurate representation of what the big picture of everything actually is. I want to rewind really quickly to something you actually just said, though, which is interesting because I haven't heard a lot of people say. It's really interesting because I concluded ChatGPT or things like this really are just an interface or a UI into some system in the same way that, say, Windows was to DOS, right? And so now ChatGPT maybe is the new interface beyond essentially Windows, if you will. And don't see a lot of people saying that. So just kudos. I'm picking that one up. Let me pause there.
Yeah, because again, I like your analogy between how Windows was the interface for DOS, and I repeated this multiple times because again, people they exaggerate sometimes the technology, and at the end of the day, it's all about data which is available online. So these guys they have built the large language model, and all what you see, it's a way to interact with this data, asking it some questions, which is, if you think about it, if someone here is a little bit technical watching us, you had access to something similar, like since quite some times. Like I remember I took a course, I was curious about data science, right? So I'm not a data scientist, but I was curious. So the first thing they teach you is that you bring such data. For example, in the US, the famous, for example, how much are the rentals in a specific area, and then you give the set, and then it will start to tell you, okay, like it seems like these areas are the most expensive. This is the a median on. It's all about statistics, really, and a lot of math, guys, like here. So now, as a data technology company, Kevin, like, what are the best practices you recommend for something like data wrangling, enrichment, and activation? How businesses again can optimize these processes and extract maximum value from their data?
Sure. So you mentioned a couple different things there. I didn't write them down. You may have to but I know data wrangling was one, enrichment was another, and what was the third?
Yeah. Activation.
Activation. Okay. Let me start with the data wrangling before I ask you again. But data wrangling, the real idea is, hey, you've got data coming into your systems and it's probably spread across multiple ones. Perhaps there's some data in your CRM that speaks about your customers. And let's just say, in this case, you're working with a large company that has satellite offices. And so maybe in your CRM, maybe you include the satellite office address or contact or things like that. You may have a broad sales system where you say, hey, I want to really reach out to this company, but it might start off at, say, a high level inside an organization, say the executive level or VP level, which maybe is at the headquarters. And so that's the location that what you would have inside your CRM. You may have things that are coming into your email system for tracking issues that you may have with customers, all these things. These systems are all essentially separated in some way, shape, or form. They usually have interfaces to talk. The problem is that the data that you have inside those is not necessarily always represented the same way. And so it can become difficult or want to essentially find these linkages. Example that I provided there, if I just started off and looked at, let's just say, address of where the organization is in my CRM, that is not going to match the address in my sales system in this case, because in one case it's a satellite office, in the other case I'm talking about a headquarters. So when I look at those addresses, I say, gee, they don't match. Now, this is a trivial example. You can probably use things like the domain name. However, if it's in another country, you may end up with I'm just making .co.uk versus a .com in one case. So now you can still start running into those kinds of problems. Frankly, a lot of times the domain for email at large companies may not be the same as the domain for their website. Yahoo is an easy example here. Yahoo-Inc. is their corporate email domain, but yahoo.com obviously is, a big portal. So there's still issues with just matching data from these systems. The real question of data wrangling is, how do I change or transform what my data looks like into something that is usable essentially by all of these different systems and put it into a consistent format? Taking the example further, in the case of my CRM, perhaps when I enter a very simple example, when I enter a date, I use whatever the locality I'm in it happens to be. So here in the US, we would say, a month, a date, and a year. But if I was in Europe, right, it's now a different format, right? It's a month year kind of thing. So just really basic things like that. Now, today systems know to, deal with locality issues, but you can extend this much further if you start talking about data that may have been human input. For example, I may have a web form or a form on a web page that somebody types data into, and there could be a typo in it. I may represent things differently. Maybe when I enter my street address, I don't include the abbreviation, or maybe I do. Is it 1234 my street or 1234 my ST dot? There's many abbreviations that can start coming in to start messing things up, especially when you start talking about states or countries or even broad names like this. A lot of these are easy to solve problems, but you still got to go through it. Take that one step further, and now you start looking at, what is your title? We did a study on data that we had seen from essentially LinkedIn profile information, and just looked at how many unique titles do we see inside the sample that we have. And it was literally over 1 million distinct titles. And that boggles my mind. How is it possible that this could be? And if you look at it in sort of by frequency, you see, obviously there's very simple things, chief executive officer, CEO, things like this. You start being down towards the bottom of this list, you're looking at, 5 people, 2 people, 1 people has these titles. And usually what it is, not always, but usually it's like a very long, descriptive thing for their title. I am the chief poobah for Department X in Corporation Y, and so it's like a very, very long thing that you sort of need to do some sort of standardization or classification to this in order to say, I really just want to call that guy a CEO because that's really what he does. Right? So being able to bring that data and even classify or categorize some of it is a really important in this data wrangling thing. That's definitely true for location information. Title is a great example. And it extends all over the place when you start looking at the type of data that most enterprises collect. You have issues around currencies, around formats of things. Even do you want to do transliteration to characters that may have come from a country outside of the U.S.? So there's a lot of these types of how do I get my multiple systems to talk together and keep data in a way that I can access in a consistent. That's essentially the wrangling side. Like pause there.
Yeah. So let's talk about the enrichment.
Okay. So enrichment would be, I start off, I've done the data wrangling. Now I've got a beautiful looking, we'll just call it layout, either a virtual layout or interface into wherever my data is. But I find that only half of the email address or half of the records that I have here have email addresses, and the other half have phone numbers. Well, what I'd like is to have phone numbers and emails for all of the people that are inside here. And I'll share anecdotally a story with you on this. We had a very large retailer. This retailer, everybody's heard of this company, came to us. They said, we've been doing these services for quite some time. But when we started doing our services, it was before people, even knew to ask for an email address. This company's been around for a long time. Can you with that? So they know their customers. They're paying their bills or what have you, but they have no way to digitally contact these people. So that would be a great example of enrichment where you say, well, gosh, here are I don't remember how many, it was like 10 million people where they knew who they were. Right? They've got billing details and they're paying their bills, but no way to digitally connect with these people. Absolutely mind-boggling. And so they can say, can you help us, find the appropriate emails for these people? And oh, by the way, things like accuracy need to be pretty high because we don't want to just, send the wrong thing to the wrong person. So enrichment really is, how do I take some of the data that I have and use it to make it more leverageable in another environment, which into the world of activation. And so with activation, now I'm saying, gosh, I know who my customers are. I know how to contact them digitally, but I now want to be able to advertise to them while they're doing whatever it is they're doing somewhere online. Well, you could go and say, purchase the audience of people who buy phones or buy my widgets. But what also you can do is go in and say, well, here are actually the people that I want to go target. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways that people go about that. But a very simple way, using an email or a hashed email or some sort of way to identify who the person is and submit this essentially to various companies, the Googles of the world, the Facebooks of the world, et cetera, to say, these are the people I'm interested in targeting. And now I'm going to ask you a very fun question. So when you log into Facebook or Google or whatever, do you log in using your, blah, blah, business.com email address, or do you use your Gmail address?
No.
Everybody uses the Gmail address. So what ends up happening is sometimes when you try to do that activation, even if you've done good wrangling and good enrichment, you end up in a situation where you can't find these people. And it's because the identifier that you have is not the identifier that the ad networks know about. And so what essentially you can do there is, what are the alternative identities or alternative associated things that can be matched, be it multiple phone numbers, be it multiple email addresses, or perhaps even a business email address. How can I find these additional bits of information to help me match them inside these giant advertising places that I can go? And so when you start to look at that, if you take a standard file, from just some marketing thing, let's say maybe you try to onboard this at a Google or a LiveRamp or one of these kinds of places, you're going to find some match rate. And what that match rate does is it says the percentage of your list that you can actually advertise to directly online is X. Let's just call it 40% or 60%, whatever. If there was somebody that came to you and said, hey, I can take that number from 60% to 80%. Are you interested? Of course you are, because these are the people that want your product. And on top of that, you're going to be able to reach them, even though you may have contact data for them, but reach them in the advertising network space now. And so we are able to use our identity graph in order to be able to make those associations and expand essentially the number of contact points that you can use for these onboarding areas. So you can actually advertise to a larger percentage of your customer base or target base.
What you mentioned about activation and, fixing the data and all this, it resonated with me because when I was working as a, consultant and a sales representative. So one of the challenges we used to have always is to have the data the way you just mentioned. So someone with a phone number without email, or sometimes it's like a Gmail address instead of a business address and things like that. So pretty much, I would say, resonated with these challenges. And, the example that you gave also as well about that company. Now, but there is one challenge I think um, here, Kevin, like with the evolving data privacy, and everyone talks about it.
Oh
So,
yeah.
what are the strategies or tools you suggest for maintaining compliance while utilizing customers' data, right, for marketing purposes? Like how companies they can do this balance, I would say, between making message more personal, but at the same time keep the privacy.
Yeah. So there's privacy is a very big area, right? One of my one of my favorite examples here is, if you went back 100 years or maybe 150 years, the outhouses probably didn't have doors, and there certainly were not, this is the one for the guys and this is one for the girls, or whoever it happens to be. So privacy is one of those ever changing kinds of things, and so there's no like, hey, if you do this, you're good. Right. It's really, you've got to stay ahead of the game, and you have to constantly be updating with it. Now, here in the US, we've got, I'm sure you're aware, a zillion different, individual laws coming out on a state by
True.
state basis. And so this creates all sorts of complexities. And one of the areas that I don't hear really anybody talking about is what is the cost to the consumer for enforcing some of these laws. And so I'll give you a really basic example. Um, some of the states, won't name any of them, but some of them are making it very, very difficult to, for example, gather even the most broad mechanic and share that with a third party. And so
Hmm.
doing that, what that means is that the cost of marketing for companies will go up as a result.
True.
And so that cost is going to be passed on to the consumer in that state. And so at some point, again, the pendulum is really far over on the privacy side. And I think it may end up tilting back a little bit, especially as some of these laws become more and more prohibitive to be able to do work. Now, that all said, you asked a great question, which is, how is it that I can work within these frameworks and things? So, uh, transparency goes a pretty long way. Allowing people to see the types of information you're gathering, have control, get removed if they want to be. Those are really important. Asking people to sign up, for services in the first place, or making sure they understand what it is that they're going to subscribe to. Essentially, really, really important. At the end of the day, it's not like, it's almost like the view of hey, as long as you're a good citizen, a good custodian of data, generally speaking, there's ways to be able to continue doing things. Um, in a simple example, you might consider using, we have a special file hashing tool that allows us to work with data that third parties have that they can share with us in effectively in an anonymized way. Data clean rooms a little bit offer the same sorts of things. So there's still ways that you can mix and match data sets, but do it in a way where I'm not actually, exposing stuff. Um, I think if we didn't have so many data leaks going on, it probably wouldn't be such a big deal. But, due to all of the security issues and, the hacks that take place, I think it really has kind of, it's kind of cast a bad name on this. Um, but that, yeah, I think it's a big, broad topic.
Yeah, it's a big, broad topic, and I would agree with you. I think I take it from a personal experience. I would like to have customized, I mean, ads for me. So for the thing that I prefer. So, again, talking about machine learning, artificial intelligence, and this is what people forget, unfortunately, that when you go to Amazon, buy something, and then you get the recommendations, and when you watch Netflix and you get the recommendation, this is actually machine learning, which is working in the background. And I don't mind, that they collect this data about me and my behavior and then suggest me something I might be interested in. What I think makes the topic more sensitive is because when you have a lot of data about your customers and someone steal it, this is where the big issue is. Because these guys, they got your email, basically anything which is we call it PII, personal identification, identity. You got your sometimes credit cards, sometimes you get, a lot of information. And this is where it becomes like really critical because these guys knows a lot about us, which is a fact. We know it. Uh, and at the same time, but we need to use it. So they need, I think the responsibility rely on how you put better defense mechanisms, technologies that as much as possible, of course, you know, data theft is the biggest threat nowadays. And every single, cybersecurity expert I talk to, they mentioned the same thing. But yeah, it's a very sensitive one. Now, um, in your experience, Kevin, like you are a technical evangelist, you are a serial entrepreneur. So, what are some common misconceptions about AI and data technology you have seen? Like, and what are like majority of the time you see that businesses, have these misconceptions, and how you think they can overcome them?
Yeah. So, well, we already discussed one, which is, oh, AI means chat GPT, right? No, that I
Yes.
all the time. But one specific more to our space, the data space, is people seem to have two really big misconceptions. The first one is that the information that the marketing companies essentially have is, extremely detailed with like just, disgusting amounts of data about every little thing going on in somebody's life. And it gives you kind of this creep factor, like, somebody's got a video camera on you all the time kind of thing. Um, there's a lot of data out there, Google, Facebook, these guys, they do know a lot about you. But broadly speaking, um, it's hard even for them to correlate and corroborate some of this stuff in a way that's, done that basically the tomes of information that are coming there are really within a small number of walled gardens. The additional data that sits out there, it becomes hard, right? So does Google take, say your credit rating and use that to do their marketing stuff? No, they don't. But people think they do, right?
Mhm.
So they've got their own set of data, right? And there's other sets of data which may have competing facts inside it, right? So it's not like there's this, oh, I know everything about it. There was recently, the, you mentioned Netflix. There's a show on Netflix called Black Mirror. And there was recently, I think in the latest season, there's an episode where I forget the name of the episode. I think it's the first or second one, where essentially they make a movie or a screenplay about, each of these people and how awful or how terrible these people are. I think it's called like Jane is Awful or something like this.
Yeah.
Very, 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 very interesting, dystopic view of what kinds of bad things could happen to you. And I think people kind of think that's how it is and that people have all this stuff going on. And it's just not really like that. A second misconception that I think is even perhaps more widespread in the data world is that people think that, their data is great or their data has all of the stuff that it needs to have inside it or things like this. And we talked a little bit about data wrangling earlier. And what we found very early on was people would upload into our system files for processing and
Mhm.
it wouldn't do anything to them. They would just download them right away. And we're like, okay, so they imported a file, didn't do anything, and then exported it. That's a weird behavior. Why is that happening? And it turns out that when you imported data into our system, we would do a bunch of standardization and things like this because we very quickly found, of course, early on that if the data came in was clean, we could do more stuff with it. So we had all sorts of automated systems go and clean the stuff up in a way that would help it work within our system. And people were just downloading it because the downloaded data that they'd get after it ran through our system was cleaned, right? We went through the process of cleaning it. They didn't want us to do anything to it except clean it. And so that kind of opened up the gates, if you will, into this whole data wrangling space. And what we really did was started talking to prospects. Hey, if we had a tool that did these things for you, would you use it? What kinds of things would happen? And it was fascinating because some of the people we talked to would say, "Well, we don't have a data problem, right? Our data is already scrubbed. It's scrubbed on input, right? As soon as the data is input to the system, it's cleaned up, and so we just don't have that problem." We
Mhm.
also, from some people, we have the best blah 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 data. And you'd look at it and what they had was good, but the fill rate on it, or essentially how many records had that information, was super tiny. So yes, you've got some great data, but you don't have very much of it, especially compared against everything you have. And so those two things led us to build on the front end of the data wrangling tool we offer, something that actually looks at your data and then gives you a report back telling you, here are the that we see inside there. And then it's things like missing fields, uh, poor contact details around records. It could even be, we talked about this title issue going on. Hey, you have this field called title and you got a Mickey Mouse in there, right? So, when you start looking at your data, maybe it's in a spreadsheet-esque type view, a database-esque type view, you might look at it and say, oh yeah, this looks great. But when you have actually an algorithm go sit on top of it and actually look at it, oh, that phone number actually has, 9 digits, not 10, or, it may not be obvious when you just eyeball it, but having a computer systematically go through and look at these things, you can discover these types of things. After we provide back a report saying, here's the stuff we found that's broken or that, could be improved, essentially the next screen offers, hey, click these buttons and we'll fix these things for you, right? So, the second one is really the notion that, again, my data is great and doesn't need anything to happen to it in order for it to, continue to work better, or the assumption that your data is great and it doesn't need anything. We've bought files before. You look at them, the sample looks great. You go open it up, you're like, what? This was web scraped from 20 different sites. And when we look at the scrape data, it's still got HTML inside it, right? So we see lots of weird things like this going on out there. And just there's this notion again of, I don't know what it is that's really there. So I'm assuming it's perfect. And it just isn't really that way in data space.
Actually, you touch on something very, I see it very often, because people, they tend to deny that they have problems, and this is by human nature. And sometimes maybe it's funny enough, because one of the things that I like to do to see like how far have you done this digitization, digital transformation, whatever name you want to give it, and then you figure out actually they are not collecting enough data, right? So, and they think they have data because yeah, we have email addresses, we have phone numbers, we have some transactions. Okay, that's enough. And okay, but have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about collecting feedbacks? Have you thought about doing surveys? Have you? So yeah, so it's not like a one. The message I want to convey here actually, it's something continuous effort that you need, I believe, to seek another ways to collect data, different type of data, and then keep all the process that like wrangling and cleaning and presentation, activation. So all this, you need this a continuous effort. Now, as we are coming even to the end, like what advice would you give to CTOs or technical leaders who are looking to leverage the data and AI to drive business growth and innovation? Is there any specific skills or mindsets I would say they should develop?
Sure. Well, I think we just got them all already, right? So obviously you've got to make sure that the data that you have collected is the right data, and that data is collected in a way that you can use it across multiple systems. That may mean that you're going to have to write various transformations for it. It may mean that you'll have to have, some sort of third party come help you and add elements to that data. And of course, when you start getting a little further down there, you mentioned earlier something around customization or customized ads. You like them being personalized to you. Do you have the right information for that? And if you do, how will you go about personalizing this for individuals? If you're just grabbing SKUs out of your database, hey, I've got 50 widgets over here. What's the right widget for this person? Okay, fine. But when you start talking about, large number of SKUs, what I see today is people are essentially doing retargeting. Hey, you viewed this product. Let me email it to you and see if I can, get you to get excited about it. Or if I send it to you 50 times, maybe I'll finally brainwash you into wanting to buy this, right?
Yeah.
But understanding what people have seen, right, how they interact with it, those are really important things. But also seeing what people do outside of your walls can be a very, very helpful thing. For example, if you are trying to sell that, new washer to somebody, that's all fine. But if you know that they are, planning to move to another state in the next 3 months or something because they bought another house or got a new job, what have you, maybe you should wait until they get there first. So if you had data that told you that they were planning on moving, that may help you save on your marketing cost there. Whereas on the other hand, you might look at it and say, gosh, this person, their car has whatever, 100,000 miles. On average, they flip their car after 120,000 miles. So, and the next year they're going to be looking for a new car according to how they've been operating for the past, X number of years. Do you have that information? Are you collecting it? Do you have access to that information? Can you do the marketing that you want to do there? So keeping a big, broad, open mind as to what data would help you get there. And when we think about, again, on the modeling side, when we think about that, trying to predict, hey, who should we send the offer to? A lot of times I like to think of it as a very simple question, right? A binary question. Will the person do this action or not? And only find a threshold of where that is. So you do need a little bit of stats or a little bit of data scienciness in order to decide where should you put that bar. People who score above this, they should get the offer. People that score below it, maybe they shouldn't. So you'll need some expertise in that area as well to be able to make those types of predictions.
I love this. And the reason I love this is if everyone goes with this approach, no one will hate these emails that usually come from the companies, right? Because
right.
if they know, unfortunately, because, still the mentality, and this is across the globe, by the way, it's not like specific to any geography. The more we send emails, the more the list is big, the better, which is, I don't agree because people are really bored of get the same message again and again. And I think, maybe this is an area where marketing tech, let's call it like this, can get enhanced by enriching it with more data, I would say. And, I would love someone, to come to me on the right spot, like a lot of times, sometimes, these, maybe some companies are utilizing something similar, and I really receive the email or I receive the message in the right time because, like I was searching about it, like I read a couple of reviews here and there, and then, someone say, hey, do you want this? Okay. I would not hate it. But if you are bombarding me with just emails just for the sake that, okay, I sent, like about this new lunch to 100,000 people. Okay, so what? Like, I can assure you that maybe 99.99 of them went to the spam folder, right?
Yeah. Well,
So,
part of the onus for even starting this company was, you remember, I'm sure, Groupon, where they would
of
send out
course.
these emails. And originally, these were not very well targeted, if they were even targeted at all, right? It was usually the deal of the day. And so you might get, something that you're just absolutely not interested in whatsoever. And you
Right.
don't know anybody that would be, but you still get it because you got to get your deal of the day. And so you start looking at it, it's like, adding some targeting to some of these things actually would maybe go a long way. Because what happens is you keep sending the irrelevant things, people stop interacting with it, right? They move on to the next thing. But if it's less often but more relevant, then people can engage with it more. There's a couple of newsletters that I've seen recently, TLDR, 1440, some of these newsletters going around, and when they first started, they definitely had, a lot of uptick and traction and so forth. I'd be really curious to see how that's changed. Obviously, I don't have that data. It's not my thing, but I'd be curious to look at it. I'd say the same even with threads, right? On Twitter, you've got whatever, 1 million accounts that tweet, that anybody reads or pays attention to. And they've got, the 99 million that nobody reads and pays any attention to at all. Threads is looking identical in that way, where basically you've got a small number of celebrities or media companies that, put their things out on threads and they get lots and lots of activity. But, Joe down the road who's talking about what he ate for lunch, nobody cares and nobody reads it. And so he posts that, once every 3 months and that's that. So looking at sort of these longer term trends on usage and activity and stuff, especially in the marketing space, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you, Kevin. Now, I have a very interesting ending question. Is there anything you wished I asked you and I didn't? And if you can answer it, of course, like you can tell me the question and you can answer it.
Yes, you should have asked me what my favorite F1 driver is.
Okay, that's fine.
No, it's Max Verstappen, of course.
Yeah, I had some instances where people were telling me that, like prefer to keep it on the topics we want to discuss. So I try to avoid asking these questions unless someone comes and say, okay, why you didn't ask me? And here you go. Here you go. You did it. You did. And Kevin, where people can find more about you and the company where you are now?
Sure. The name of the company is Versium Analytics, versium.com, Versium.
Like this.
Obviously, there's all sorts of information. There's a pointer to my LinkedIn page. We've got a blog there with all sorts of information and things like that. You can see demos of products if that's something that's interesting to you. And hey, if you connect with us on LinkedIn or wherever, happy to chat with you there as well.
Yeah, great. And I make sure that in the episode description there will be the link to your LinkedIn profile and the link to the company also as well. And if someone is interested, you can reach out to Kevin. I'm sure that I get excited to see a demo, I would say, although like I don't have the need. I used to be the demo guy. So anyway, thank you very much, Kevin, for staying this late for you, I would say. And as usual, the way I end my episodes is I ask everyone who's listening or watching to this episode for the first time, if you like it, please let us know. If you didn't like it, also please let me know. I like to hear feedbacks. I like to have these discussions with you. And if you are interested to be a guest, same as Kevin was today, you can reach out to me directly. I'm very active mainly on LinkedIn, but you can send me also an email. You can send me a DM on Twitter if you want. I'm on Thread, but not very active, honestly. So, yeah, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and leave your feedbacks. Would love to hear more about what you like, what you didn't like as well. So thank you very much for tuning in and hope to see you again next episode. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.